I used to be, I'm such a Bill Burr fan that I actually bought a ticket for me and my wife and two of our friends to go see Bill Burr at the Hard Rock Casino down here in Hollywood, Florida. And I have to say, it was one of the worst shows I ever saw in my life because he got up there and Bill Burr has become woked. He has become woked, I assume, because his wife is very much on the left.
In this last few months, you've had a few things happen, which is Ben Shapiro talked about going to one of your shows and complaining about you becoming woke, which sort of then created this.
He doesn't even know what that word means.
Let me summarize.
His definition of woke is white liberals' definition of woke, and they didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
They just took the word from black people.
So it turns out the beef between Ben Shapiro and Bill Burr was reignited recently after Burr's appearance on the Good One podcast. The situation between these two actually began quite a while ago, so to make sense of it, let's start from the very beginning. About 7 months ago, Ben Shapiro did a segment on his show about the Luigi Mangione situation in which he essentially blasted anyone who wasn't sympathetic to the CEO of United Healthcare, one of those people being Bill Burr. Now, the angle Shapiro took I thought was quite stupid. He began by criticizing Burr for not being funny anymore and for having weak stand-up material, using this to suggest Burr was disconnected not only from his audience but also from regular people and from what's going on in the country. Shapiro then transitioned into showing Burr's take on the Luigi Mangione situation, which ironically not only disproved everything Shapiro has said up to that point, but also made it clear that the person actually disconnected from what's going on in the country wasn't Bill Burr at all. It was Ben Shapiro himself.
So this brings us to Bill Burr. So I have to say, Bill Burr is so Bill Burr, I used to really enjoy his work. I mean, on occasion, I still enjoy his work. He's a comedian, which means he's very hit or miss. His Red Rock special, for example, hilarious. I used to be, I'm such a Bill Burr fan that I actually bought a ticket for me and my wife and two of our friends to go see Bill Burr at the Hard Rock Casino down here in Hollywood, Florida. And I have to say, it was one of the worst shows I ever saw in my life because he got up there and Bill Burr has become woked. He has become woked, I assume, because his wife is very much on the left. Over time, I think he became embarrassed that many people on the right thought he was very funny. And so he decided that he was going to start woking it up. So this entire show that he did in Hollywood, Florida, it was so bad that he got frustrated with the audience. The audience was not laughing at his jokes because his jokes were basically about how Floridians were a bunch of anti-gay racists. And Floridians were like, that's not true. There are a lot of gay people who live down here and a lot of Hispanics and black people who live down here. And in fact, the room is filled with Jews. Right? And so he actually got so frustrated, he ended up cutting his show early and walking off the stage. And the reason was he was totally disconnected from the audience. Well, that disconnect has continued. You'll remember that he appeared on Bill Maher's show where he declared solidarity with the pro-Hamas students on campus. And now he is proclaiming that he is very happy that CEOs are walking around in fear for their lives. Okay, now, you do get some extra points for being a comedian in today's day and age, meaning that we'll tend to give you some more leeway to say edgy things because you're trying to be funny. And it's not clear to me here that Bill Burr is attempting to be funny. This is just his actual political opinion. He's not saying anything funny or insightful here. Here is Bill Burr yesterday explaining that he is perfectly fine with CEOs having to live with full-time security because they fear they might be shot because, after all, they're murderers too. I don't believe that Bill Burr holds the same standard for comedians. There's an argument that's been made by the left. It is a crap argument when made about comedians, and it's a crap argument when made about CEOs. The argument goes something like this on the left. People like Bill Burr mock the vulnerable. They mock the marginalized, and thus they are a danger to the vulnerable and the marginalized. So presumably, Bill Burr should have to live in fear of making a joke. Bill Burr should have to live in fear because he doesn't know who he's damaging. In any case, here is Bill Burr openly cheering the murder of a United Health executive because he says CEOs should live in fear if they don't act in the way that he would have them act in a system that he has no fixes for, by the way.
You know what's annoying me about this kid who killed this CEO is none of these news programs are talking about the incredible lack of empathy from the general public about this because of how these insurance companies treat people when they are at their most vulnerable, after we've all given them our money every month and now we finally need you and all you do is deny us. And then all of these things are taking the pictures of their CEOs off their websites. You know, I got to be honest with you, okay? I love that CEOs are afraid right now. You should be. By and large, you're all a bunch of selfish, greedy pieces of shit, and a lot of you are mass murderers. You just don't pull the trigger. That's why it looks clean. That's why these people look, oh my God, oh, he was just, walking into a hotel. It's like, okay, but what was his job? What did he do? What was the results of it?
Okay, Bill Burr is and a piece of. Okay, well, what he is saying here is truly evil. He's truly evil. He's saying you should live in fear if you're the CEO of a company and that company does things that Bill Burr deems to be bad things.
Now, if you simply take a look at the like to dislike ratio, you can get an idea of how much people agree with what Shapiro has said so far, and the comment section is no different. Ben Shapiro is out here trying to convince us that paying $90 for a $12 drug is normal. Years ago, Ben made a video saying, quote, "The left is going to cancel Bill Burr one day." Years later, he makes a video trying to cancel Burr himself. Literally became exactly what he hated. Quotes, "Bill Burr is worth 14 million, so why is he speaking for working class people?" What an interesting insight into Ben's worldview. I wonder who Ben speaks for. Yes, Ben, we peasants and workers have been too ungrateful. We will strive to accept even lower wages and longer hours and praise the foresight and wisdom of you and your billionaire buddies. And I think you could genuinely scroll for hours without finding a single comment that agrees with Ben Shapiro and his ridiculous take. Now, I would also like to point out that personally I find it quite strange when regular working people with a 9-to-5 get sucked into Ben Shapiro's political beliefs. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, I can understand it. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I do understand why you would want to support what Ben Shapiro is supporting. You do get a lot of benefits out of it. But for the regular person with a 9-to-5, following Ben Shapiro and what he believes in politically is like being a masochist. You genuinely get nothing out of it. The only thing you get is screwed harder and harder by the billionaires and the people in power. Now, let's move on because like I said, Burr recently responded, and once again, not only did he prove how connected he is to what's going on in the country, but he also touched on something that is happening online more and more. The fact that some people cultivate an audience full of racists or full-blown nationalists, basically a bunch of political fanatics, which is most likely a huge chunk of Ben Shapiro's audience.
In this last few months, you've had a few things happen, which is Ben Shapiro talked about going to one of your shows and complaining about you becoming woke, which sort of then created this.
He doesn't even know what that word means.
Let me summarize.
His definition of woke is white liberals' definition of woke, and they didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
They just took the word from black people. That's the worst thing about our people is not only do we take from other cultures, we don't even take the time to understand the definition.
Yeah.
He went there to be annoyed so he can then have something to talk about, and then he can make money off of dividing his own country.
Yeah.
Those people, it's treasonous what they do.
Yes, but to be fair, or not to be fair, the fact is that it worked for what his goal is, which is then it became a thing online where then a certain portion of the right complained about how you're woke.
Racists.
And more racist.
They're racist. Yeah, they send pictures of monkeys to me and my wife. They're fucking horrible people, and they're cowards, and they never say it to your face.
Yeah.
They never do that. And no, they're like, look, dude, there's an ugliness that's out there right now where, there's certain podcasts out there that if you're a racist, if you're an anti-Semite, if you're a psycho-nationalist and you want a softball interview, there's podcasts out there where you can, and they will laugh at your fucking bad jokes and just give you this pass. And it's like, there's a really ugly thing that's going on out there, and it's the kind of things we've already seen this, and we've seen what it does to a nation, and it's not the way to go. It's not the way to go.
So, and then
Now, of course, Shapiro responded with what I would say is one of the cringiest monologues I've seen in a long time. I assume Shapiro reads many of his points from a prompter, which there's nothing wrong with. A lot of shows with huge budgets run this way. But seeing Shapiro trying to be funny with many of the references he makes was something I did not expect to make me cringe this hard.
Okay, so now Bill Burr would presumably call that Bill Burr insensitive and unresponsive to the needs and definitions of black people. Which, all this is amazing, guys, because Bill Burr is whiter than a painting of a polar bear in snow on a white canvas. So he's actually the most annoying form of a woke person. A white lib, the kind he likes to criticize. The white person who apologizes for being white, by pretending that he can speak on behalf of black people about the systemic privileges of being white. Oh, yeah, while pulling down millions of dollars to be an angry thumb of a human. So bald Rumpelstiltskin over here, who gets mad when you call him by his real name, is still pissed off. I didn't enjoy his comedy show last year, and he thinks that I and my friends and my wife, we all paid to attend his show just so that I could criticize him. No, here's the thing. On a random weekday night, if I'm going to a comedy show, I'm going because I want to laugh. We paid to attend your show because you used to be funny. And then you transed yourself and turned into a white, bald, allegedly male version of Sunny Hossin on The View, screeching at me about income inequality and racism. There is some irony to the fact that as you lost your nuts, you morphed into a shriveled nutsack of a human. And now you've decided that you're a victim, and that everyone you know is a victim, and that America is cruel and nasty and such, and you're deliberately misunderstood just because you won't put on a great show anymore, which makes me sad, because I enjoyed watching Bill Burr. But now watching you is like watching Robin DiAngelo, but even whiter and even faker and less funny, and with a screechy Boston accent to boot. You turn into Billy, the piss-drunk woke leprechaun. Good luck with that, my dude. Listen, I hope you turn it around. I really do, because the world needs better comedians. And I like a lot of comedians who disagree with me. Louis C.K., Dave Chappelle. But you know what we don't need? 57-year-old men trying to earn street cred with the fellow kids by turning into a human embodiment of those retired in this house lawn signs. That makes me sad. It does. And yeah, you're being a woke jackass.
Now, since Shapiro gave some advice to Bill Burr about his comedy, I'd like to give some advice to Shapiro himself. Get some better writers. And if Shapiro writes his own material and talking points, then in that case, hire some writers, because that was not it. And since we're on the topic of comedy, I don't think Shapiro really understands how it works. A lot of comedians, when they have new material and want to test it out, usually perform in front of an audience to gauge whether the material needs to be adjusted or completely changed. You might also find that in some cities a joke might be a hit, while in others it's a complete failure. This doesn't just apply to comics who are starting out, it applies to every comic no matter how long they've been doing it. The only way to know if a joke you came up with is funny is to test it first. So if we assume that what Shapiro said was true and Bill Burr did not have a good night, a good reason for that might be because he was testing new material, and once again, that is assuming that what Shapiro said is true, which might not be the case. Also, let me point out the obvious here. This opinion comes from a guy who supports a political party that unironically called Trump daddy. And not only that, they also wanted their supporters to call Trump daddy and have as their face for comedy Joe Rogan, who hasn't been funny since forever. So if Ben Shapiro doesn't find you funny, I think that's a compliment. Now let's move back to Bill Burr, who responded on the same podcast even after Shapiro gave his response following the podcast release.
What do you do then when you're put in a position, like SNL asks you to host the week after the election, right? That's like, it's for a comedian, hypothetically, to talk about politics, to unite the nation. How did you feel when you were put in that position?
No, it's an honor to be asked to do that. You know, and I made fun of Kamala and I made fun of Trump. And then I did a couple of silly jokes. I kept it light. You know, you just... you do what you do. I don't put that level of importance on excuse me, I don't put that level of importance on my act. What I'm finding is that people keep trying to categorize what it is that you're doing. Like that idiot Ben Shapiro. No, he's woke now. He's like I don't. That fucking guy, someone came to me and goes, hey man, he was trying to bring me into his fold. At one point, the guy liked me.
Yeah.
You know? And then when I didn't, then all of a sudden, I'm a fucking asshole. I mean, I'm supposed to look at that guy like he's an adult?
Do you feel...
Alright, I'm not exactly sure what Bill meant when he said Shapiro tried to bring him into his fold, but I'm pretty sure it means Shapiro tried to roll Bill Burr into the Daily Wire, probably as a host. And honestly, that might be one of the dumbest moves Shapiro made, thinking Bill Burr would actually stoop to that level and accept. And if Shapiro's bitterness towards Bill boils down to Bill Burr refusing his pathetic offer, then the only way to describe Shapiro is as a spoiled man-child throwing a tantrum because he didn't get his way. Also, this is kind of obvious, but I don't expect Shapiro to recognize it, or maybe he does and just doesn't care. But if, for example, Bill Burr were to take Shapiro's offer or any other offer tied to a political party, especially the MAGA party, then Burr's ability to criticize and make fun of Donald Trump, for example, would be limited due to his ties to the party, and also most likely his fan base would shift from reasonable, rational people to cult members who blindly support Trump. Now, imagine how those people would feel if Burr criticized the cult leader. This would lead to a Joe Rogan 2.0 situation where he wouldn't dare to criticize the person he endorsed, not even in the slightest.